Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. As indicated, this is a continuous use case webinar. Today we are going to cover a pretty interesting use case, how to provide continuous access to online shops, actually multiple of them. You may or may not know of Continuent. We are a MySQL availability company. There's two keywords. MySQL, we've been focusing on MySQL marketplace early on, and we always been focusing availability first, effectively providing continuous operation for business critical MySQL applications. And today's use case, it is around, excuse me, YNAP or Yox Net-A-Porter Group. This is, if you don't know them well, it's actually a really large billion-dollar company, multi-billion-dollar company with multiple luxury retail websites, as well as that they have a white label sites they manage for about some 30 different brands. They've been our customer quite some time, and they were one of the early active MySQL cluster topology customers for us. We'll make a deeper dive on that shortly. But before that, a couple words of myself. If you can see my background, I'm a sailor. But beside that, I've been around. I like to run my own show and been involved with the 7 startups over the years. And on MySQL marketplace, I've been basically from the day one. Back in early 2000, it may have been a kind of an interesting bet to see that MySQL will gain the dominance it has actually gained on the various online applications, whether there's gaming or e-commerce or social media and others. We've seen a lot around these years. I have been called father of Continuent Tungsten. This is our flagship product currently, but you may not know that the Calera is also based on the early technology that we were involved. Back in the early days, we were building a synchronous replication solution, not unlike Calera. You may know it also XtraDB cluster, but we decided that was not the right path for the company. And we focused on asynchronous solution to provide much better geographic reach for our solution. The team behind Calera used to work for me, and they decided otherwise. Calera is a very good solution for what it does. It's a local availability solution, but our aim was the more grandiose and larger. And yeah, I am an officer and sailor. I was in the Finnish Navy when I was a young kid. And even today, I continue to sail on San Francisco Bay, where I am based. One of the most challenging waters for any sailor. So how does Continuent fit in that kind of a picture on this marketplace? We've seen the rise of the open source. As I said, it may have been an interesting bet 20 years ago almost, to see that the MySQL will rise the dominance it has. Cloud computing was early days, practically non-existent. We had a virtual environments, but already early on, we decided that whatever we do, it needs to be platform agnostic. It was built on Java. And our focus was around making a bet that there will be a significant need for the highly available business critical MySQL application. And we've been on this mission since day one. Continuent definitely is not one of the biggest companies in the world, and we won't ever be, so we're really highly focused. But we aim to be the best company around whatever we choose to do, and that has been focused early on. And our choice and focus is being able to provide geographically scaling, highly available MySQL data service backends. YNAP, this is about the single sign-on solution for millions of worldwide consumers accessing on their various websites. A couple of words of the YNAP if you do not know it prior. As stated, it's a leading e-commerce company. specifically in a fashion industry area, multiple brands also. They have been our customers since 2014. Typical customer of ours tends to be multi-year. Some of them have been already over 10 years, and an average customer has been 8 years with us. YNAP raised over the years some 120 million funding, quite respectable amount of money. They merged with Yogs, which is an Italian-based. YNAP Net-a-Porter was a UK-based entity. Yogs was an Italian-based entity. So it became more of a European powerhouse for the fashion. And then they got basically taken over by Richemont back in 2019 with almost $3 billion valuation. And the question, why did YNAP choose Continuent? This is kind of interesting. In 2014, already pretty large e-commerce entity. Why do we rely on someone like Continuent? Why do we rely on MySQL? And it was about availability, disaster recovery, performance, cost, or maybe all of these above? And the answer is effectively all of the above. This tends to be the story with most of, if not all of our customers. They come to us about the availability, but they stick with us all the other reasons, and also the excellent 24/7 services we offer. So the YNAP's challenge, as a recap: availability, disaster recovery for the continuous operation, performance, and the cost. Let's make a little bit of a deeper dive. First and foremost, it was about the availability and continuous operation. YNAP had at the time, still has, a application internal called CView. It's a single sign-on portal for the portals that they serve. They own 3 websites: Net-a-Porter, Mr. Porter, the Outnet. They all effectively share the same, basically, customer information. Being able to access these sites, you need to be able to access the single sign-on site, and in order to make the purchases. And they reached us at the time to provide a solution. And how did we go about to solve this? The first one is always around availability, and this is where the Tungsten cluster comes into play. That there's a basic component is that the 3-node cluster, you can have more than 2 replicas on the cluster, but this is a typical composition. And for the availability point of view, the key ingredient, our secret sauce, is Tungsten proxy. We have it also known as a Tungsten connector. Effectively, it's an intelligent proxy. It's a traffic cop between the application and the underlying data service. And this is the one that routes the information to the primary database for updates and replicas for the reads. And it also provides you the kind of, should there be any type of a failure on the primary database, effectively instantaneous failover to one of the replicas, and that becomes the new primary. And it also can be used for the managing the traffic during the maintenance cycle. For example, that if there is a database version upgrade, schema upgrade, and the underlying hardware upgrades, we can do that kind of rolling upgrade with the zero downtime maintenance cycle. Effectively, you do update one of the replicas first, then the second replica, and then you promote one of the replicas as the primary, and then you do the final update upgrade on what was the initial primary. And this can be done during the normal business hours, highly effective. And we have a lot of software as a service, e-commerce, gaming, financial services, telco customers who actually find the zero downtime upgrade capability one of the key reasons that for our solution. But high availability may not be enough. And in this case, YNAP was also thinking about the possible failure, site level failure, or data center level failure. They are not currently running any of this in a cloud. They have their own data centers, 2 different data centers in the Greater London area. And they chose to build in such a way that they have 2 active clusters. We call this as a composite cluster. So any update that actually takes place in one cluster automatically gets replicated onto the secondary cluster. So in any given moment, they are active. And from a connector point of view, which has a global view, application can write either one of the clusters. YNAP chose a little bit the different strategy. At any given moment, they choose to keep only one cluster active, and then secondary cluster is available should anything happen. And if there is a data center level failure, they can fire up all of the applications at the almost instantaneously, and they have already basically hot cluster available to continue the operation. The Tungsten connector also has a capability of the load balancing, so that in YNAP's case, they are using a port-based routing rules. So they have a specific port for the updates that goes to whatever database is primary at the time. And then they have another port that is for the read-only traffic that effectively gives a higher performance for all the operation. And connectors can be installed on multiple locations. It could be apps, or they could be their own layer between application and the data service, or they can be installed on the database servers. But in their case, they chose to do that on application layer level. All of this is being managed using a Tungsten dashboard that kind of give you a nice graphical user interface. Obviously, command line interface is also available for those who prefer that and feel that it's faster and easier. But then having a visual that the actually system is up and running is highly useful. And I can show you a little demo online here. We have what this is effectively a model of the YNAP's clusters. Obviously, we are not accessing their production clusters, but we tend to build these clusters for our own needs, so we can test and support our customers more effectively when we have a effectively replica of the cluster readily available. And just to demonstrate kind of a little, so what happens that if we were to, for example, shut down database 1, which is currently primary for the London East cluster. And we're going through the process. This is effectively kind of showing that what the failure could look like. And as you can see, DB1 failed. We automatically seek the replica that was at the closest of the primary cluster, in this case DB3, and we'll promote that as a new primary. All this takes place automatically behind the scene. Tungsten connector is in charge of as a traffic cop. It just basically stopped the traffic between application and the cluster for a while, and then open up them once again when the cluster had reconfigured. And in this case, it took a little bit longer than just the sub-second level, because we have the secondary cluster, and we need to also not only do the configuration in the first cluster, but we have to reestablish the replication connection with the secondary cluster. And also we can show how easily we can bring back another node in the cluster. So for example, in this case that we may have gone checked out whatever reason, we felt maybe this was on purpose. We can basically have a recovery command. And basically this requests the DB1 to join back to the cluster. And it goes to the process, starting up the database again. It sees what was the last transaction applied to this particular database. It checks from the replication screen what other transaction needs to be applied. And then it comes back as a member of the cluster, in this case as a replica, goes to DB3 was chosen to be a new primary database. And while all of these kind of operations takes place, whoever is using the data service can continue access, and it's a normal function operation, maybe slight degradation on the performance level, but effectively it continues the operation. As we see, the DP1 is now as a replica introduced back into the cluster. And if you want to promote that as a new kind of primary again, so this looks like I didn't choose that, promote, oh, come on. Now we, okay. So we basically are telling cluster that let's bring DP1 back as a new primary. And once again, it goes through the process of reorganizing initially the local cluster and then reconnecting the remote cluster with the replication links. And all of this takes place on the background. So it's kind of nice, really useful tool. And think about if you have instead of the 2 clusters, you may have a few tens of clusters, and we have a customer is actually running hundreds of clusters. Single biggest deployment currently we have about 1,000 MySQL instances clustered, and another 1,000 replication nodes from those clusters as well. So, okay, so we are back to where we started, and all along, should there be a traffic against this cluster, it would have continued without any hiccups whatsoever. Going back to the presentation, obviously the cost is always concern. In YNAP's case, it's the relatively small deployment compared to some of the bigger ones we have. So it was less of a concern. For any customer, cost is always a concern. And what we like to do is that while we are operating in an open source realm, we have a commercial solution. It is based on annual subscription, and subscription includes not only the software, but also 24/7 support services. So there was an initial price jump on the first few clusters, but then soon we started leveling off quite significantly. And we value, obviously, volume, so that the bigger the deployments, the lower the per unit cost will be. We also value loyalty and the long-term commitment, as indicated that many of our customers are multi-year, effectively all of them. When we sign up a new customer, we fully expect them to stick with us 5 to 8 years. Actually, in our mind, it's over 10 years, but the data services is really a critical component, and we want to make sure that it really works and works well. As a recap, with the YNAP's deployment, it really is about availability first, disaster recovery or continuous operation second, scalability some extent, but it comes through the basically ability to build these type of backends on the fly. We have our customers using tens, hundreds of clusters, cost. And the last, but not necessarily the least, is the 24/7 support. We will come back to a little bit of that later, but just to give an idea, during the past 2 years, across all of our customers, average response time to any urgent request has been less than 3 minutes. It's pretty impressive. Our customers run business critical application, hundreds of millions of revenue riding, some cases billions of dollars revenue riding on our technology. So we want to be available when and if anything were to happen. Quick look, Continuent Products. We effectively have 3 products: Tungsten Clustering, Tungsten Replicator, Tungsten Dashboard. The last one is actually free of charge, system management view for the clustering solution, but offered as a separate product. Not needed if you want to use a command line or other tools to manage your services. Tungsten Clustering, it is locally deployed clusters, but it also can be globally deployed clusters. And as stated, it is about first and foremost continuous operation. including the zero downtime maintenance type of operation from the kind of being able to run 24/7, 365 applications effectively without no downtime time. It is also geographically distributed clusters because we are using asynchronous replication. It allows us to build highly reliable clusters across the wide geographic area. We have our customers running in multiple clusters in the US. We have our customers running clusters that include the US East, West, Europe, and Asia Pacific, all built as a single composite cluster servicing global customers. We will have other webinar coming up in the near future, explaining, for example, that how Riot Games provides backend for 350 million game players across these 4 geographically distributed areas. Our solutions are also platform agnostic. We initially started over the years ago on-premises type of deployment. Increasingly so, our big customers are in the cloud. Over 70% of our clusters actually are deployed in AWS, Google Cloud, or Azure. We still have a number of customers on premises, and it's kind of interesting. We can build also a solution that is hybrid cloud, have as part of the footprint running on premises, either the hard metal or the virtual environment, and then you can have basically matching clusters in the cloud. And you can use that as for the continuous operation. You can use that for the cloud migration, but it works really well. And the last elements, a couple more. Intelligent proxy. This is the key ingredient for the whole management of the cluster. And then obviously full support of MySQL. Full support meaning that you can use any specific MySQL version you want, whether it's the MySQL, MariaDB, Percona server, any version of those. And there's no application changes needed when you deploy Tungsten clusters. So if you currently have a single database, also as the primary replica using a MySQL on replication technologies, you can deploy Tungsten in a matter of, in some cases, minutes, most cases less than an hour, and have a fully functional, highly available data service available locally or in the cloud. Tungsten Replicator is actually one of the foundation components of the clustering, but it's also an independent solution. When you use in a cluster, it's a homogeneous replication, replicating from a MySQL to MySQL, providing the high availability and disaster recovery. But you can also use a Tungsten Replicator to replicate data into various heterogeneous targets. These targets could be, for example, an Aurora database in AWS. It's another form of MySQL, even it's a MySQL compatible database, not MySQL, but nevertheless, we can replicate it into that. Or you can replicate it into Redshift, Vertica, Hadoop, Kafka, and a number of other targets. These could be for the reporting, analytics, data lake, whatever needs you have. And it's kind of an interesting solution because it has really flexible advanced filtering capability, so that you can have the basically one-to-one replication, or you can have just a replicate specific table. And while you replicate, you can also modify the replication feed on the fly. For example, we have customers replicating from MySQL into Oracle database, which requires that the data type translation as you do that. This solution is available as an AMI in Amazon Marketplace if you want to kick tires there. And we already did take a look at the Tungsten dashboard, effectively managing how many clusters you may have using a graphical user interface. Going a little deeper on the benefits, Tungsten cluster solution, and this basically applies most of our customers. We have brought our support services first, which is not a really feature of the software itself, but it's a significant feature to our customers because they can truly rely on us being available. And we are not only supporting Tungsten cluster, obviously we do know it inside out, but since that all of our team members have really in-depth knowledge of the MySQL, either as a MySQL DBA or site reliability engineering type of role in various companies, we tend to also address MySQL specific issues. We are not remote MySQL DBA entity, but in many ways we match the knowledge and service of those entities as a part of our offering. Cost saving is the second real option. While we are, again, commercial solution, we are actively aware we are operating in an open source realm. In many ways, we believe that our solutions are less expensive on the long run than quote unquote free open source solution if you choose to patch them together. There are some alternatives for the Tungsten cluster solution, but none of them are as highly integrated, fully tested, and well supported as our solution. So when you are truly thinking about the cost structure, what you end up dealing with us compared with if you were to do as kind of a do-it-yourself type of solution, we tend to become actually less expensive on the multi-year engagement window. And recapping the key benefits on the continuous operation and zero downtime maintenance. Once again, this is the key focus of our offerings. It is about being able to maintain continuous availability for business critical applications. And instead of having potentially hours of downtime, the recovery happens in some cases a sub-second, in other cases, depending on the database size and transaction volume, still in seconds, and it's significant. And from the application point of view, it still appears as if it is continuous operation because the connectivity layer, the proxy, manages the traffic in such a way that you don't even lose the connectivity and connections to the underlying data service. There's just a kind of a blip when the data service seems to be unresponsive, and then it continues as if nothing happened. And the fact that one can do maintenance operations during the normal hours and without any downtime window needed. When you think about the global operations, customers all over the world, there no longer is a window sometime in the late Saturday night between Saturday and Sunday morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, that you may have a little less traffic on the site. That's not the reality. Most of the sites have a continuous operation because they have customers in Asia Pacific, they have customers, users in Europe and US. So you have to really focus on being able to do anything and everything without the downtime. We touched this already, geographic scaling, ability to build solutions that are not only locally, but globally available, and being able to bring the clusters close to the users so that you have a faster response times, and then having these clusters supporting each other in form of a DR is a significant additional benefit. If you lose, for example, that there was a big hurricane in South China Sea that effectively cut the internet lines there for a while, Riot Games was able to route all the traffic from Asia Pacific region to Europe and continue the operation as if nothing happened. Hybrid cloud, multi-cloud, we already touched that as well. And these we also touched in prior, so that I don't think so there's a need to recap them, but it's good to have them available and see that all the kind of points that we do cover. This last one, the fact that you can deploy our clusters in a matter of minutes is a significant. You can automate this using, for example, Ansible or some other tools, and you can basically deploy in the cloud using templates, fully automated deployment process, supporting all the different MySQL variants, supporting obviously security. You can do that any and all traffic is using SSL, or you can also encrypt in place the data content. We have our customers that are needing a HIPAA compliant health data, for example, in the cloud. and we have a ability to support all of those as well. Quick question for the audience. Not sure if JJ, you are ready to set up the poll for this, but obviously we would be interested if you are actively investigating a MySQL availability solution. We would be happy to talk with you. Maybe you have something already in place, but you're not quite happy with it. So we'd like to compare what we might be able to help you. Or maybe you are completely happy, just curious to see what we offer as a comparison. So.
Yeah, and I think, in terms of this question, feel free to contact us directly, rather than maybe running the poll now, Eero. We can ask the audience member to just contact us. And of course, we'd love to hear from you on this. So you can use the chat box for that in your control panel, or even the Q&A section of your control panel, and let us know what your situation is in terms of high availability or disaster recovery for MySQL. Or of course, feel free to contact us directly after this webinar to discuss this further as well.
Sounds good. Thank you, JJ. Just a few words about Continuent and our team, kind of recapping this presentation. We have a proven team that's been, most of our team members have been together since the early days. We don't really have much of a sales and marketing organization. We are really an expert team of the data replication, database connectivity, and database clustering management engineers, and obviously the world-class support team that we have. And all of them, these members have a really, really deep operational database experience, and not only MySQL, but other databases as well, but specifically MySQL. And we really are highly available as well. So our software is not only providing high availability services, but our own team continues to be highly available at minutes notice should a urgent request comes up. And to give an idea of who is actively using our solution, beside YNAP, there's a familiar names like Adobe. You may have used Adobe Sign e-signature service, fully running on Continuent clusters. Another Adobe company, Marketo, significant footprint on Continuent, providing marketing analytics services. We started with them 2010, initial deployment for clusters, and we have been helping them to grow business to the point that they were acquired by Adobe for a $5 billion valuation 2 years ago, now running hundreds of MySQL instances on Continuent software. Other names that I'm sure you recognize, Carfax, they have thousands of MySQL instances clustered with them. Continuent technology. Carmen is all the key functions, not the ones that were down recently, on Tungsten cluster solution. And as we already discussed, for example, Riot Games, they have a significant footprint on Continuent solution, providing geographically distributed services for their game users. And few reasons why choose, or maybe more importantly, why to stay with Continuent. One of the things that our most recent customer survey give us amazing 100% satisfaction rate. I'm sure there's plenty areas that we can still be even better, but the fact that our software actually does work and our support team is always available is a significant factor why that we've been able to achieve this high number. And it would be demonstrated in another way. 97.5% of our customers last year did renew subscription, and the only loss we had was actually a failed software as a service application. The big customer ours decided to pull the plug on that particular platform, and obviously in that process we lost the case. But we haven't really seen our customers replacing Continuent solution with any competing solution. In the past 3 years, there have been none. It's kind of amazing. But we have seen the reverse. We've seen people using AWS Aurora coming to us. We have seen Cholera users coming to us. We've seen people using do-it-yourself solutions and ultimately realizing that that may not be quite the adequate solution. So we'd be happy to engage with you and bring you on the list of our prestige customers that we currently have. These customers, by the way, 70% of our customers are software as a service providers, which is kind of when you look back 10 years ago, that MySQL wasn't the list of choice for many of the software service providers. E-commerce obviously was also heavily built on MySQL database. We have financial services, credit card processing entities, and we have some telco type of customers, global roaming type of customers, for example, and online gaming customers. So that these are kind of the composition of the clusters. All of these share the kind of same idea. It's a business critical app and effectively providing hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars of revenue for our customers. We have some small customers, startup. We actually have a special pricing for the startups that to kind of ease them out in the process getting started. And as indicated earlier, we have also the aggressive pricing for the larger companies as well. As a side note, you may have seen back in 2014, our operations were acquired by VMware. At the time, VMware was actively building a cloud solution, vCloud Air, to compete with AWS and Azure and Google. And Continuent was chosen as the best database technology and database engineering team to build database as a service solution for vCloud Air. But then after the VMware changed the strategy, whatever we were offering to them didn't apply anymore. So we decided to spin off Continuent in our own entity again. And we've been running as an independent company since 2016, late 2016, and continue building our solutions at a relatively rapid pace. And Marketo is reaching the 10th anniversary with us within a month from now. And as a future, significant majority of our customers are already running in the cloud, but we are obviously building even more cloud services type of solutions, higher level automation, better monitoring, better management capability, and easier deployment of the clusters, especially when you have a large number of clusters. Those functionalities become increasingly important. So stay tuned. Tungsten Cloud will be available soon enough. So thank you, everybody. Smooth sailing, like I like to say. I'm a sailor. Any questions, JJ, came up during the session?
Yeah, and if you do have questions, feel free to use the question and answer section of your control panel, which I think you should see at the bottom of your screen. You can use that, or also use the chat box to ask your questions. So feel free to use it and ask questions there about today's content. And there was a question earlier, Eero, when you were talking about AWS Aurora, AWS RDS Aurora. Just if you could talk about a little bit how Continuent Tungsten compares to that specifically. Sure.
Yeah, Aurora actually is a really good solution. It has a number of capabilities that makes it, for example, the DevOps needs really excellent. Not necessarily always the best for the business critical workload when they are distributed across the multiple region and multiple geographic location. Aurora by itself is MySQL compatible solution. So it's basically whatever version right now they're lacking behind. It has a combination of 5.6, 5.7 features. It doesn't have all of the 8.0 feature set available. And or Amazon makes it really easy you to replicate data into Aurora, but really difficult to get the data out. And so that it becomes a pretty expensive solution that the bigger the system grows, that you have to be actively aware. And when you want to build solutions that are beyond single region, basically the disaster recovery capability is not quite the same as fast, smooth, seamless that Tungsten. And then when you want to build something like that, multiple geographic region, let's say that you want to have a solution running in US West, US East, Europe, and Asia Pacific, maybe even more location, that is effectively impossible to build today using Aurora. So that for the local availability needs, DevOps needs, excellent solution. For the business critical globally distributed solution, not so much. And then if you think about the fact that not everybody wants to run everything in AWS alone, obviously Aurora is a AWS specific solution. But if you want to have a multi-cloud deployment, not available. If you want to have a hybrid cloud, it's not available, sort of, but in reality, not really. So we give out far more flexibility, and we actually ultimately outperform Aurora, obviously, with our support services and overall kind of hand-holding our customers. Nothing can match that.
Thanks, Eero. And there is another question here from someone who was interested in the intelligent proxy. They hadn't heard of that before. Give a bit more details on that.
Yeah, Tungsten proxy, or aka Tungsten connector that we used to call it. It is a highly intelligent proxy, effectively traffic cop for the MySQL application data coming to data service and underlying data service. There are some other proxies on the marketplace, like Proxy SQL, as an example, and they have a similar baseline capability. But what most proxies are missing, the fact that the Tungsten cluster solution, we not only have a proxy servicing the traffic, but we also have a Tungsten manager and Tungsten replicator, all working in synchronization. So that while the proxy sees the underlying data service and it knows which one is the primary and which ones are replicas, and so can accordingly guide the traffic as needed. But when something happens, let's say that the primary fails, new replica is promoted to new primary. This is done by Tungsten manager. Tungsten manager and Tungsten proxy are actively communicating each other. And by doing that, they are orchestrating the database change in such a way that from the application point of view, there's effectively as if there are no hiccup, no outage at all. And we have a much higher, and then Tungsten proxy is not only locally aware, as the most proxies are, it's globally aware. So if you have a cluster of clusters, as many of our customers do have, then it can also know that if the whole underlying data service was lost, it can guide the all the traffic on the remaining cluster or clusters for the continuous operation in a disaster recovery scenario.
Great, great. Thanks, Eero. I don't see any other questions for now, but you can still use the question and answer section if you want to. But in the meantime, Eero, I don't know if you have any, closing words for the moment.
Sure. It was a pleasure to have you all on this webinar today. There will be another webinars coming up. Actually, the next one is already next Wednesday, and then there's another one following Wednesday. So we will have altogether 9 Tungsten use case webinars talking about the various deployment models, but all of them have the similar capability. It is about availability and continuous operation for the business critical MySQL application. So hopefully you have enjoyed this. Maybe you join some other upcoming webinars. And if you find this interesting, please feel free to contact us. We are looking forward to helping you with your business critical MySQL needs. Thank you. Have a great day.